Hey everybody, we are toward the ending part of a long day, but I am not done yet. My boys are having their birthday party in about 4 days, and right now I actually have a little bit of time to set aside to go ahead and mix up the cakes. I don't this week has been a little bit stressful, lots going on, and I'm just going to try and whip something up pretty fast. I like to go ahead and get the cakes made and baked, and then I like to freeze them ahead of decorating them. It's a little bit easier to decorate that way, and I kind of believe that when you bake a cake and you freeze it, then thaw it out and serve it, it's a little bit more moist, and I really like a moist cake. But I'm gonna give you guys a couple of baking tips and tricks. And but before we get started here, I just want to remind you that we've got a lot more coming up on the channel and on our A Life on the Farm blog with recipes, baking tips and tricks. And so be sure and follow us and hit the notifications and try to keep up on some of the different things that we've got going on. We've got a lot to come. I can't even tell you. I'm telling you right now, we've got a lot that's coming up. I'm trying to bust all that out. But okay, so back to it. Let's go ahead and get into some of this. I am making two different cakes. We've got two boys having a birthday party, lots of family coming over, but I'm making two different cakes, two different kinds. And it'll be a surprise at the very end when you see exactly what they turned out like. But I'm gonna cheat tonight, okay? Normally I like to do homemade from scratch, but I'm gonna cheat a little bit. But in doing the cheating, I'm gonna show you a couple tricks that you can do to make a basic box cake mix taste way better. Taste like homemade. So I'm doing a devil's food and I'm doing a white cake mix. I'm not even going to tell you what they're going to end up yet. But I'm going to start with the devil's food, and I'm just mixing these up. This is very basic, so I'm just using a hand mixer this time. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell you what it's calling for and tell you what we're going to change it to. This one box devil's food mix that I got for like 79 cents or something, it calls for a cup of water. We're going to do a cup of milk. It calls for a third cup of oil. We are going to do 2/3 cup of melted butter, and it calls for 3 eggs. We're doing 4. And then the white cake mix calls for a cup of water. We're doing a cup of milk. Calls for a 1/4 cup of oil. We are doing a 1/2 cup of melted butter. And then it calls for 3 egg whites. We're going to do 4 egg whites. And then I'm going to throw in a couple little things extra to both of them. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing going. Like I said, I really prefer to do from scratch cooking, but sometimes you just don't have the time to pull out all that stuff, and sometimes it's just easier this way. And when you run across a sale on these box cake mixes, it doesn't hurt to grab a few, have a few in the pantry. You can take a box cake mix and turn it into some really good cookies, and that'll be coming up also on another one. I think I'll get both of these going at the same time. I've already got my oven heating. It calls for 350. I have heated it to 315. There's a reason for that. I'm doing layer cakes, and I want them to cook as evenly as possible. I do not have currently any of the little, like the Wilton strips that go around the pan to help it bake more evenly. So I'm going to cook it lower and slower. Sometimes that kind of helps out a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead. I've got the cake mixes in here, and I'm going to start with the devil's food. And it's calling for the water, and I'm doing the milk. Get the glasses on so I don't mess it up too bad. Okay, got our milk in there. And it asked for the oil. I'm doing butter. Already got it pre-melted. And now we're doing the 4 eggs instead of 3. Now, we are adding a couple of things to this recipe, a couple of additionals. I don't know if anyone has ever had some people call it Texas sheet cake, and some people call it, I think, grandma's sheet cake or something like that. My grandmother used to make that, and we all loved it. And it's chocolate, but it has cinnamon in it. Also has vanilla. Now, we are a big fan of Mexican vanilla. If we start getting close to empty on that, we start hyperventilating, and the whole family joins in together in a Mexican vanilla run. I'm going to add a teaspoon of Mexican vanilla to this one, and I am also going to add a teaspoon of cinnamon, and that's why I brought up the Texas sheet cake. It's chocolate with cinnamon in it. And I love those two things together. They are awesome. So I'm going to add the teaspoon of cinnamon as well. All right. I can go ahead and give that one a good mix. Okay, so that one's mixed up pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and rinse these off, use them again. On the next one, the only thing really different that I'm going to do is separate the egg whites away from the yolks, because I'm going for a white cake. Otherwise, I'm basically doing the same. It asks for a quarter cup of oil. I'm doing a half cup of butter. And instead of a cup of water, we're doing the cup of milk. And I'm going to separate these eggs real quick. I remember doing this with my grandmother and also my mother when I was pretty young. I've been baking for a long time, like 3 years old. I started baking with my great-grandmother, and I think that's probably where my love of baking comes from. If I could just bake everything, I think I'd be pretty happy. My kids love to help me in the kitchen, making cookies and cakes and whatever. I like to homeschool, and I like to teach them how to cook. I want them to be able to have a good knowledge of preparing an entire meal. My daughter, when she was 8 or 9, was preparing full meals. My oldest son, when he was 10, he was making chocolate chip cookies by himself. He did it so often that he didn't even have to look at the recipe. And he also used to make fried potatoes, homemade fried potatoes, like French fry types. And he used to experiment with different kinds of seasonings and bring us a tray and say, what do you think about this? So I really love it when the kids get into the cooking. It's one of those life skills that they need to learn. Okay, so in the white cake, I've done the other. I'm going to go ahead and add the vanilla to this one. Does not call for it, but I'm adding it. But because it's a white cake, I am using clear Mexican vanilla. Just going to add a teaspoon. And then I'll go ahead and get it mixed up. Okay, it's all good and mixed up. So they are both ready to be able to put in the pans and get them started cooking. I've got the oven, it's already ready and set at temp. And of course, I'm sure anyone who's ever been in a kitchen knows that you've got to prepare your pans so that the cakes will actually come out of them. It really makes a mess if you try to decorate a cake and half of it stays in the pan. So I'm going to go ahead and use my cooking spray. Just makes it quicker. I'm going to use my cooking spray, and then I'm going to go ahead with the typical flour thing. You coat it with flour. I am not going, now a lot of times when you're making a devil's food or a chocolate of any kind, you can use cocoa instead of flour, but I'm going to have icing all over it. I'm really not worried about that, and cocoa is way more expensive than flour, so I'm not doing that. So I will just start with one of them. I remember when my grandmother showed me how to do this. I thought she was the coolest thing ever because she just whipped this thing around, had everything coated and nothing flat. She didn't even use the spray stuff either. She used Crisco on a paper towel, which is what I like to do when I can. When I've got a little extra time anyway. I like to be able to spend an entire day in the kitchen, doing a bunch of baking especially. But when I have a big plan, when I can get a lot accomplished, I don't have any problem staying all day long in the kitchen. But when I have things to do, now of course this is the end of gardening season right now, and most of my stuff is dead. The next thing I've got to do, besides my fall stuff, the next thing I've got to do out there is go weed and clean up the beds and get them put to bed for the winter. And I don't really want to. I guess I'm putting it off. Okay, last one. Pull the trash can out. Okay. They are all ready to go. So now I'm going to go ahead and fill my pans. Now I mentioned that we're going to cook them kind of low and slow. I'm trying to make them not dome up in the middle as much. I don't mind trimming the top off if I need to, but I would really rather trim just a tiny bit off. I don't want to lose the cake. That bowl is lickable for sure, and that's my next step. I'm going to get these smoothed out into here as smooth and flat as I can get them. Now these are going to be the coolest cakes. This one is basically, I mean, it's a devil's food cake, but it's got, obviously, I put the additional stuff in it. It's got, but it's got more taste to it, and it's going to be more moist. I'm sorry, and it's late, but it'll have, it'll have better texture. It'll have better flavor than your typical box cake mix. And but the main thing about it is it's going to be decorated really cool. The boys will like it. But this other one, I'll go ahead and tell you, it's one that I made up. People do them, but I started doing it recently because I was in the middle of, I do a lot of canning, and I was in the middle of canning up 3 different batches of plum jam, and one of them, someone's home, one of them did not set. I even tried to can it a second time, and it still wouldn't set. So what I decided was, instead of plum jam, that was going to be plum sauce. And I now make quite often a plum sauce cake. And it's really yummy. We took it to church. Everyone really liked it. My husband really likes it.
I love it.
Okay, so both of the cake mixes are now done and in the pans, ready to be put into the oven. I'll have to set them, like I mentioned, at a longer time because we're going with a lower temp, and I will show you what they look like when they come out, hoping that they end up as flat as can be.